Stop scrolling and listen closely, because this is not random, and it is not just another love message that sounds good for a minute and disappears. Something changed this morning, and deep down, you may have already felt it before you even clicked here. A person who has been fighting what they feel for you finally reached a point where denying it became harder than accepting it. They woke up with your energy already in their mind. Not by choice, not by habit, but because the truth they kept pushing down has grown too strong to stay hidden anymore. This was not a small emotional shift. It was a silent breaking point, the kind that happens when someone runs from their feelings for too long and suddenly has nowhere left to run. Stay with me, because what happened inside them today explains the distance, the mixed signals, the strange silence, and the hot and cold behavior you have been trying to understand for so long. And before this is over, you may finally see why they could never truly forget you, no matter how hard they tried. So do not skip, because the next part matters more than you think, and one line in this message may explain everything you have been feeling without words. They never planned to wake up with thoughts of you taking over their mind so completely. That is the first truth you need to understand. Most people are not strong when it comes to facing what they buried deep inside over time. They act strong. They look calm. They tell themselves they are in control. But when real emotion begins to rise, especially emotion that threatens the image they built of themselves, they start resisting hard. That is exactly what happened here. For a long time, they tried to stay neutral. They tried to act unaffected. They tried to keep their distance and move as if nothing serious was happening. But this was never small, and it was never simple. Underneath that calm surface, a real inner battle was already happening. You probably sensed it too, that subtle shift, that strange tension, that silent pull in their energy that felt different from ordinary attraction. It was not just confusion, it was recognition, deep recognition. The kind that shakes a person because it forces them to admit something they were not ready to say out loud. They did not welcome these feelings when they first appeared. They questioned them, they pushed them down, they hid them under pride, excuses, busy routines, and emotional walls built over many years. Because what they feel for you does not fit the life they thought they were controlling so carefully. And when a feeling challenges someone's pride, their identity, or their sense of control, they do not usually move toward it right away. They fight it. They deny it. They give it new names so they do not have to call it what it really is. That is what they did with you. They told themselves it was temporary. They called it chemistry, timing, circumstance, curiosity, maybe even weakness. Anything except the truth. Because the truth had weight. The truth asked something from them. And the stronger the feeling grew, the harder they tried to bury it. But hidden feelings do not disappear just because someone refuses to face them. They build pressure, quietly at first, then steadily, then all at once. And pressure always finds a way out. That is why this morning felt different. Not because some new emotion suddenly appeared from nowhere, but because the pressure inside them finally cracked something open. Their old ways of escaping did not work anymore. Their distractions failed. Their routines failed, their usual mental tricks failed, and in that quiet morning space, when the world around them was still and there was nothing loud enough to drown out the truth, your presence came back into their mind with more force than ever. Not just as a memory, not just as a passing thought, but as a realization they could no longer explain away. Attraction can be ignored for a while. Curiosity can fade. Even desire can be pushed aside when someone is determined enough. But deep emotional impact is different. When someone truly feels moved by another person, their mind starts returning to that person again and again, even when they do not want it to. That is where they are now. They reached the point where they had to ask themselves a question they have avoided for too long. Why do you affect them like this? Why does your absence feel loud? Why does your energy stay in the room after you are gone? Why do they keep circling back to you no matter how much they try to move forward in another direction? They tried to answer with logic. They tried to keep everything cold and simple. But logic started failing because real feelings do not always make neat sense. The truth is, people do not fight this hard against something that means nothing. They do not keep trying to suppress something that has no power. Every effort they made to remove you from their thoughts only made your image stronger. Every attempt to forget only sharpened their focus. Every distraction fell apart exactly when they needed it most. That is not weakness. That is what happens when a connection becomes real enough to break through all the usual defenses. Stay with me, because once a person reaches that stage, their behavior starts making sense in a completely different way. They wanted control over their emotions, full control. That mattered to them more than they ever admitted. They wanted to decide who gets close, who matters, and who has no effect on them. Then you came into their life and disturbed that balance. You became the one feeling they could not organize, the one presence they could not file away, the one person they could not reduce into something easy and manageable. And that loss of control is what scared them most. It was never only about you. It was about what you awakened inside them. You did not simply catch their attention. You touched a deeper place in them that had been asleep, protected, or ignored for a very long time. That is why they pulled away. That is why their energy became inconsistent. That is why they acted close one moment and distant the next. Not because they felt too little, but because they felt too much. And feeling that much means a choice has to be made. A real one. Avoidance is not proof that the feeling is weak. It is often proof that the feeling is strong enough to create an inner war. Their conscious mind kept telling them to stay safe, stay guarded, stay logical. But underneath that surface, something deeper kept rebuilding your presence in their thoughts, especially in quiet moments, especially when the noise of life died down and the truth had space to speak. Over time, they started noticing something they did not want to admit. You were not fading from their mind. You were becoming clearer, sharper, harder to ignore. That is what happens when denial starts losing its grip. Distance can protect a lie for a while, but it cannot erase what is emotionally real. In fact, sometimes distance does the opposite. It removes distractions and leaves a person alone with the one truth they were trying to avoid. That is what happened this morning. It came as a quiet wave, not loud, not dramatic, but final in its own way. Their walls did not fall because someone forced them down. They collapsed under the weight of what had been building inside for too long. And that kind of collapse shakes a person deeply because it is not public. It is private. It is not about what they told others. It is about what they finally had to admit to themselves. And once the mind accepts something on that level, it does not go back easily. They know now. Not halfway. Not maybe. They know. But acceptance does not bring peace right away. That is the part people do not talk about enough. Sometimes acceptance creates even more inner chaos, because now the truth has a name. Now the feeling is real. Now they must think about what it means, what it asks from them, and what they stand to lose if they keep ignoring it. Keep listening, because this is where the pressure gets even stronger. They thought admitting the truth inside would make everything feel calmer. It did not. It made everything feel more intense. Once a feeling has a clear name, it stops being something vague in the background and becomes a living reality. Every memory gets heavier. Every silence carries more meaning. Every thought of you lands deeper than before. And now their mind is split. One side wants to move closer to you. The other side wants to run back to safety. One side wants truth. The other side wants control. One side feels the pull. The other side fears what will happen if they fully surrender to it. This is not ordinary confusion. This is an inner divide between strong desire and strong self-protection. Both are active at the same time. That is why, after they recognized their feelings, they still did not rush forward. They paused. They overthought. They studied every detail from every angle. Things that once felt simple now feel heavy with risk. Because anything that matters this much starts to feel dangerous to a person who is used to guarding their freedom, their image, and their emotional balance. But here is the contradiction they can no longer escape. You do not fear losing what you do not value. You do not overthink what means nothing. The same feeling pulling them closer is the exact feeling making them hesitate. And that constant push and pull is draining them more every day. That tension is showing up in their whole life now. It follows them into normal moments. A voice, a pause, a silence, a random memory. Something small can suddenly bring you back into full focus without warning. The deeper part of their mind holds onto you because it does not care about timing, pride, or plans. You crossed a line inside them. You are no longer just an option or a passing thought. Now they are forced to face the question they kept avoiding at all cost. Why you? Why does your presence affect them in this exact way? Why does your energy reach places no one else reaches? The more they search for a simple answer, the less simple it becomes. Because this was never built on convenience. It was never just timing. It was never only attraction. It comes from recognition, real recognition, the kind that feels both unexpected and impossible to deny. And if this connection is real, then it asks for something hard from them. Action, openness, vulnerability, exposure. Those are the very things they have spent years trying to avoid. So they create distance, hoping space will slow the storm inside them. But real emotional bonds do not weaken just because someone steps back. Sometimes they grow louder in the silence. Sometimes absence becomes the thing that proves the connection was never shallow at all. And lately, that truth has become impossible for them to ignore. They feel it when their thoughts return to you out of nowhere. They feel it in sudden emotional waves during the day. They feel it in the way something inside them refuses to settle, no matter how tightly they try to hold it down. Suppression keeps failing, and now the pressure has changed shape. Before, they were fighting feelings they did not want to admit. Now they are fighting feelings they fully recognize and still do not know how to handle. That creates even more tension, because knowing the truth but resisting it anyway is exhausting. They are not only struggling with what they feel for you, they are struggling with what those feelings reveal about them. The need to connect, the desire to be seen, the hunger to be understood by someone who reaches them beyond surface words. And along with that comes fear. Fear of being vulnerable, fear of being changed, fear of caring so much that losing you would hurt in a way they could not easily recover from. So they move back and forth. One moment they imagine what could happen if they let this be real. The next moment they tell themselves it is too risky, too complicated, too much. That back and forth is not random, it is protection. It lets them touch the feeling without fully stepping into it. But you cannot live in that space forever. At some point, delay becomes its own pain. And lately, that pain has been getting louder. What once felt manageable now feels overwhelming to them. What once seemed far away now feels close and immediate. What could once be denied now feels solid and undeniable. When something buried inside finally rises to the surface, it does not return gently. It shows up in mood changes, frustration, restlessness, and those strange moments where they cannot focus because thoughts of you break through again. You are no longer just someone in their outer world. You have become part of their inner world, and that changes everything. External things can be avoided. Inner truths cannot. They follow a person into quiet moments, into sleep, into the still parts of the day when there is nothing left to hide behind. Their resistance is weakening now because the real question is no longer whether these feelings exist. That part is already settled. The new question is what they are going to do about it. And that question scares them more than anything else because action means exposure. It means risk. It means they may have to give up the comfort of pretending they are untouched. Most people spend years trying to avoid exactly this kind of emotional moment. But once someone has been changed from the inside, there is no clean way back to the person they were before. And you have changed them more than they planned, more than they wanted, more than they can keep hiding now. Your absence has become louder than your presence ever was. Think about that. That is one of the clearest signs of all. It is not just that they miss you, it is that your influence follows them even when you are nowhere near. That creates a deep tension that keeps cycling back stronger each time. Every attempt to move on leads them back to the same quiet truth. Nothing else feels the same. No other connection carries this weight. No other distraction lasts long enough. And that slow comparison is wearing down the walls they built so carefully. Everything else starts to look thinner, flatter, less real next to what they feel for you. That is why a quiet panic has started growing inside them. Not dramatic panic, not the kind others can see easily, but the slow kind that comes when a person realizes something meaningful cannot be replaced. And if it cannot be replaced, then losing it feels terrifyingly real. Their behavior is beginning to shift because of that fear. One part of them wants to come closer, just to end the pressure, just to tell the truth, just to stop the endless noise inside. Another part tells them to hold back, protect themselves, and stay inside the old patterns that once kept them safe. But those old patterns are not working like they used to. That is the important part. Something has changed too deeply now. Their old defenses no longer feel natural. Even their silence is starting to feel false to them. They are becoming more aware of their own patterns than ever before. They can see how they run when things get too real. They can see how they hide behind logic when emotion threatens their control. They can see how they use distance to avoid facing what matters. And once a person sees their own avoidance clearly, it becomes much harder to keep pretending they are in control. That awareness creates another kind of pressure. Going back to old habits begins to feel almost impossible. The space they created between you now feels forced. The silence feels unnatural. The emotional numbness they once relied on is no longer available in the same way. Something essential has shifted inside them, and now that shift is asking for a decision. The mind cannot stay split like this forever. It cannot keep living in contradiction without eventually breaking toward one side or the other. They are standing very close to that edge now, closer than they would admit out loud. One more wave of emotion, one more failed attempt to suppress what they feel, one more morning like today. That may be all it takes, because this process does not end with endless silence. It ends with confrontation. It ends when a person can no longer keep their outside behavior separate from their inside truth. And that moment is approaching fast. Stay with me, because the final part explains why their resistance now feels weaker than ever before. Their resistance is not fading because they suddenly became fearless. It is fading because they are running out of reasons to keep fighting. The illusion of total control is breaking apart. The hope that time would make these feelings disappear has failed. Time did not weaken this. Time made it clearer, heavier, and more real. Now inaction feels harder than risk. Silence feels heavier than honesty. Distance feels more painful than truth. They are no longer trying as hard to make their emotions seem small, because deep inside they know they are not small at all. What they feel for you is solid now. It is real. It carries weight. It is no longer something they can brush aside and call temporary. Clarity has not brought them peace. It has brought urgency, restlessness, a steady inner pull that keeps moving them toward a choice they cannot delay forever. At some point, people can live with fear. They can live with uncertainty. But they cannot keep betraying what they know is true without paying a heavy inner price. That price has become too high for them now. And that is why this morning mattered. Not because they said anything out loud, not because you got a confession right away, but because something final happened inside. They recognized what they feel. They accepted it. And once a person reaches that point, the story is no longer about whether love exists. It becomes about how much longer they can hide it before it finally comes to the surface for real.